All right, and we are back again with the Pat Stedman podcast interview series. And today we have a very special guest. She's known by Tree. She's known by Trina. She's known by the moniker of the Wendy Rhodes of Money Twitter. What is going on? I'm gonna call you Tree in this. What's going on, Tree?
Cool. Nothing. I'm working, living, trying to figure out my online identity, how to best rep myself, trying to launch some things.
This is a very Pat Stedman-esque problem. So I can relate to this very much of not really wanting to be defined, and because you have so many different interests, you have so many different things that you want to talk about. You don't want to be like that person who's like jammed in a niche. Like whenever I would go to marketing seminars and stuff like that, accelerate your business. They'd always, like, it's happened at multiple different occasions where, they'd say, like, you get in like a little small group and they say, you got to like narrow in, you got to niche down your brand. What is the one sentence that you're going to say to people? It's going to let them know exactly how you're going to help them. I'm like, I have no fucking clue. No fucking clue.
And every time I try to find one, that's why I've carried around the label Misfit like for a long time, because that's the only one that's ever like I've never outgrown or that just hasn't felt misrepresentative. And in our world in Money Twitter, everybody's always like, you need to pick a niche. There's no room for nuance here. And I'm just like, okay. And I'm like, tried all these different ways of complying with that perspective. And I can't.
Well, when you're, sometimes it's like, I think we want to be defined by being almost undefinable. I mean, for me, like being a dating and relationship coach is like, that was about as strict as it could go. Like it was really like, even that doesn't really do it full justice. But, I was able to find some general area to like focus on. But if you say, like, what is this thing that you have to solve for guys that you always solve for guys? It's like, well, I solve a lot of different problems for guys. And so like my business, coach manager, we talked about it and branded me the coach for all seasons, because that way I could be able to kind of tackle guys throughout their entire life cycle with women. Now, but I'm curious about this, because I think that like a lot of people, and this is myself included, so just to let the audience know, I don't really know what I'm getting into on this one at all. Like, I love Tree. I love what you put out on Twitter. I love it. But I don't like, I want to use this as like an exploration of like, who are you and what are you like? You sent me before this started, like the Wendy Rhodes of Money Twitter. Like,
I haven't even seen Billions.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I looked it up.
I'm just trying to find a label.
Wendy Rhodes. So tell me about that, because I mean, you're like, you talk about relationships sometimes. You talk about very much holistic, healthy, conscious living, and then you talk about money. I mean, so what's the story? What's going on here? What is Trina Nuance all about?
Trina grew up in the restaurant business. Since I could walk, I've been mingling with variety, right? Different cultures, different backgrounds, different classes, whether it was like the custodian painting the side of the wall, my mom's restaurant business, or the guy who owns half of Tampa. Like, I've been socializing in that way since I could walk. You know what I mean? So I've always loved talking to people. I've always been around high level minds, and also the part of me that's like loved the creative artist grunge, like bottom tier, like whatever, drifters. Like, I've always just loved bopping around, exploring, talking to people. But then I also have a super introverted side of me where I'm like the way I describe it is, if I'm talking to somebody, my entire world revolves around you. And if I'm alone, my entire world revolves around me. And, whatever it is, it's just like zeroed in. And that has took me on a journey of many different friend groups, many different jobs. I've been on Twitter since forever. Like I graduated high school and I got this plastic little trophy that says Miss Twitter, Trina Nguyen, class of 2013.
Oh,
But at
wow.
the time, of course, it was stupid. It was like me bitching about my high school boyfriend and like lyrics that resonated. And I hate biology class. It's stupid. But I've always been obsessed with Twitter because it gave me a space to like think out loud. It's something different about thinking out loud and like journaling in private. Like
Yeah.
something about it, even before I wanted attention for voicing things out loud. And so when I left, I always knew I wanted to write and share my story. Like since I was a kid, that's always been the dream: write, share a story, help people, talk to people. And when I left the restaurant industry, it was 2021. And since then, I've bopped around multiple different positions, mentee positions, job roles, just explored a lot. And now I'm here and like have alchemized my expired savior complex to like help people in a healthier way and indulge in my weird interests behind the scenes. And yeah, that's the way I can summarize it.
So tell us about what do you do to help? How are you helping people?
I have 3 roles currently. I 2 of them are in a community called Klein Ascension.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm community manager there, and I just started being a closer there.
Mm.
And I also have a private coaching offer. Right now I only have 1 client. And what you said about the dating relationship angle resonated with me because when we started working together, my angle that I was trying to find was inner work guides, right? So at first it was like, that's why they wanted my help. And then when all of those things were resolved and life was renovated, now it's like they're trying to build their own online business in life. And it's just taken on so many different things. So I'm sure that's an entry point for you. And then I imagine it takes on a life of its own. And,
Yeah, it's interesting what you just said there. So like circling back to before, dating relationship coaching, this was sort of the vector that I chose. But it's really a vector for the rest of the life to open up. What I've found is that obviously at the core it is all an inner issue, right? How you internally feel about yourself, your internal relationship with reality, your whatever blocks you have. Yeah, it's nice to know information, practical stuff. That's useful. But most people don't really need that so much as they need to change the way that they orient themselves. Because if you orient yourself correctly, all the information is right in front of you. It's easy to digest and absorb. Otherwise, it just kind of bounces off of you. But in order to manifest that inner shift, and I think this is where like a lot of people who get into like inner work and healing, I think it's where a lot of them mess up and become less effective. And I've even had some clients like this who like just want to do inner work. It's very new agey, right? Just want to do inner work. I don't really think that inner work works without outer exposure. Like you need a vector to trigger what needs to happen in the unconscious, and relationships is a really great vector to do that. So it sounds like that's a little bit where you're going right now. Is that right? Is that
no,
fair to say?
absolutely. Absolutely. I even threatened to fire my client because they drifted into a space where they weren't doing anything external, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not here to just make you feel good. Like I'm here for you to actually actualize what you want to. Otherwise I'm the reason that therapists and spiritual healers and inner work has this stupid bastardized reputation as terms.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because people criticize those things and then they also drift towards wanting that. So it's weird.
Right. I can think of an ad title right now: therapist hater. Like, what are those ones? No, actually, it's pretty ballsy to threaten to fire your first client. That's actually really ballsy. I don't know if I'm like, oh no, don't go. way back when I started. Um,
I mean, I don't think it was a threat, and I don't think that it was.
no, I know.
Yeah,
It was probably like it was made to
I
kind
guess.
of
Yeah, I guess it's kind of threatening.
a little threatening.
I mean, I was like, I love you, but like, I'm here to help you, and like, if you're not going to do this, I can't continue helping you because that's not helping you. You know?
Yeah. So this is obviously, I mean, my audience is a very, relationship oriented audience. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what's your experience with dating today? What do you think about it?
It's such a
And why?
loaded question. um, I guess the first things that come to mind are that like we're not dealing with the same world, right? Like everything is very blown wide open.
Mhm.
So while frameworks and what feminine and masculine energy will never not be, how those things are communicated and like how they're navigated is different now.
Mhm.
I think they have their place because it's also not fair to just ask everyone to have zero generalizations, have zero like definitives, black and white polarities of nuance. Like it's not fair to ask the human mind to do that for everything in all situations 24/7. But I think it's becoming super, super important for people to have a sense of that because otherwise they're just immobile navigating all of this, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of fear in the world right now. There's a lot of cope, like I just everywhere I look, there's projection, which is inevitable too. But I think I can't help but look at everything through a duality of natures because not only is that who I am, but that's kind of how I've always seen the world and like oscillated. And it looks crazy, right? Like it looks like super schizo, super Goldman. If you remember Goldman, he told me I
Yeah.
had sexual vibes.
He told you.
And I like ran with that. Now I'm like, oh, the two wolves inside me, blah, blah, blah,
Oh,
blah,
yeah.
blah. And so yeah, I think once people start to get that understanding of their natures in those ways and like and how different scenarios or different relationships or different projects breathe life into different elements in them. And sometimes they're like, and if you're talking to a man, like he's very sensitive to the term feminine, unless it's somebody like you, which is pretty unique. You have to avoid those terms. Terms can be very triggering.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. That's everything's blown wide open. I think the digital environment we're in plays a huge role. People are super extreme with that too, right? It's like go touch grass, and it's like okay, but also the internet has so much to offer.
Yeah.
Also, you can't lose touch with reality because like that's what you reside in. So like having to play that balancing act, you can't really outrun it. Like people are like, oh, the algorithm is going crazy. Like, have you looked outside? The world is going crazy too. What you pay attention to, it breathes life into it in reality and on your social media feed. Like, I don't see a difference. That's why it's hard for me to categorize things that I am able to provide input and helpful guidance with because I end up being this like externalized filter for people,
Mhm.
right? And like, it's more about how I think about things and how I navigate things versus what I know. Like they might know, for instance, if I'm talking to somebody I'm helping in business, they might know way more about business than I do. But if you know how to navigate things, you don't really see a difference between different things, then it becomes applicable in multiple areas, including relationships. Uh,
Mhm.
and yeah, I just think that balancing act is something I really want to equip people with because it seems to help in everything.
Yeah, the whole tech thing is funny. Like obviously we have to remember what it means to be a human. We have to remember what our bodies were designed for, and it's part of being healthy is, I guess you could say, the detox or the space from it. But I mean, you see people who are really freaked out, like even with AI. Take AI for instance. I mean, the Chat GPT is like, to me, just, I mean, retarded. Like I don't.
Artist in me hates it.
Yeah, I don't. I really don't care about it. Like it hasn't upset me. What's been annoying to me is like, five lessons from ChatGPT. Like those threads annoy me, but like the existence of some AI that's answering these things. I think if you have a spiritual basis and you understand your value, you realize that it's just another tool. Like the smartphone is just another tool. It's like, oh, you know, people are never gonna look at libraries anymore, and it's gonna disrupt everything because now people are just gonna be Googling stuff. It's like, well, has that been a net loss for human ingenuity? I mean, uh, obviously, if you're just scrolling, then your IQ is dropping, or but having access to the internet for smart people who have some degree of discipline has been like an enormous boon. So anyway, without going and digressing too much, people are talking like they're you know, go touch grass, but then they're like tweeting about it. You know what I mean? Like they're like this stuff is being disseminated on the internet. Like you have people on the internet complaining about technology, and it's like you're on the internet. Like
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
there's
Even Plato criticized paper. You
yeah.
know, I remember I read somebody told me that, informed me of that on Twitter, and I remember seeing that. It might have been Alexander Cortez, but I remember seeing that like, oh, and I was like shooting it down. And I have a tendency to like make my life a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. So I'm like, okay, the internet they probably criticize this way, paper and pen they criticize this way. So I'm sure AI has its place.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
don't care about it.
Yeah. I don't care about either. I mean, there's no question that bad AI has the potential to like enslave humanity, but I mean, good AI has the potential to liberate it. So, you know, all the healing technologies people are talking about, all that stuff is going to come out as a result of AI. So I think it's just a matter of making sure we have good people working in development, not just bad people. But anyway, but you know, what I'm really interested in is kind of two things right now. This for where this conversation's gone so far is what is what is like the main wound that you see that women have today, and where is technology's role in it?
I don't think. Okay, so obviously all wounds go back to parents, right? Uh,
Mhm.
not all. Maybe I feel uncomfortable saying absolutes like that, but most, if not all. And we're entering this world where like parenting has been obviously historically shitty, and like roles have gotten really blurred in the similar way we just talked about. And I don't think, and I'm gonna circle back, I swear. I don't think that it's just as simple to say that women are the wounded feminine, right? Like that they just need to get back in touch with their feminine side and fully reside in that, because I tried that for a little while, and it wasn't safe to live in the world that way. And it also just wasn't me, but I got negative feedback from both sides. And maybe, of course, in some scenario where a woman is fully provided for and taken care of for from childhood on, and like finds a husband immediately, and all these ideal situations that facilitate that, maybe. But I rarely meet a woman who's gone about her life that way in the modern world that way. And so I think the wound is in both areas. Like I think, I guess it goes back to the term integration, right? Like I think women are very lost. They're not safe to just reside in the feminine anymore. They have really silly attempts at the masculine part of them, which is that action oriented leadership, protective, honorable um,
Mhm.
element to them. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of women interested in both extremes too, right? And even navigating to get to just the super feminine, mother only, female friends only, stays at home, if that's your goal, or if you are trying to have a job and, just incorporate more of those masculine elements. Whatever you're trying to land on, you need both to get there in today's world, in my opinion. Like I
Mhm.
know plenty of women who like, I mean, it's not like to make money online these days, you have to um, work 24/7, right? Like I know plenty of girls who have like just little hobbies that they could make lucrative and spend like an hour a day on, or like a couple hours a week on, and live the rest of their lives as a mother and like a homemaker and all these things. Like everybody has their own collage of interests and experiences. And it's like navigating that with such a collage fragmented world has just gotten very, very nuanced and subjective. And so it's hard for me to answer that in an absolute but like I said, like it all ties back to parents, right? We have all of I have both a mother wound and a father wound.
Mhm.
And I run into a lot of people who have both too.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll go back to you in a moment, but I just wanted the comment about that. I mean, I, I think that the reason that everything is so messed up is that we're transitioning, and we don't like we had these things that were, how do I put this? Um, they worked. They were safe and they worked, and they worked for, I mean, a very, very long time. Um, and now we're like, as we have more technology, and I think as with that, consciousness is changing. Like, I know that I'm like, I'm not trad, although I'm not trad. Like, there's a lot of value in tradition,
Absolutely.
but I think that there's the big issue I see in this whole corner of the internet, and it's an understandable issue, is this attempt to understand what's going on right now. And I think people look at it like things have been distorted, we have to go back. And you can't go back, because the reason, like, maybe like distortions are being introduced in order to try to hijack people's energy and create more chaos and more conflict. But ever since the Renaissance, society has been moving in a different direction, as a different direction in terms of thinking about stuff. And it has, this thought has a progression to it. And part of that, like, you can't even say that when it comes to postmodernism, that postmodernism was all just complete junk. I mean, it mostly is, but there is something to the idea of like, you almost have to understand beauty, you have to deconstruct everything. I think the problem is that we've just stayed with postmodernism for about 70 years too long, 50 years too, somewhere between that time period. Like, I felt like most of the postmodernist lessons were kind of established by the 50s and 60s, and we could have moved on back to creating things of beauty with now more intention of like, we're doing it because we want to do it, not because of some sort of intellectual exercise. I want to try to. I'm rambling right now. I want to try to.
No. This is all accurate, and like we're all clawing at the air for like an anchor of some sort, right?
Yeah. Well, so so I guess to get more practical for the audience here, there's a lot of commentary about women. Well, what happened to women? Women don't know how to be women anymore, and
they're not wrong.
And they're not wrong. They're not wrong, but then there's the flip side to it, which is women have in many ways not been allowed to win. And I like, if a woman becomes super feminine, super kind of trad, or whatever, people say things on the internet, but I've worked with hundreds of clients. Okay. And these guys aren't slouches. They're intelligent men. They're broadly successful, some very successful. And I genuinely do not know any off the top of my head that wanted a woman who was going to be what people LARP about on Twitter. I mean, when push comes to shove and they get a really, feminine, docile woman who's like, wants to just, go along and be helpful, they are not interested because there's no fire or vitality to her in a certain sense. They'd almost feel like they don't really have a sense of self from her. And but the flip side is that these guys might be drawn towards a woman who's got a little bit more punch, it's a little bit more independent, but then they're also turned off by the abrasiveness and the fact that she's constantly challenging. So it's like they don't really just want that super, super feminine, less developed, I would say, woman. Because this is as consciousness is moving forward, it's like we've almost had to, part of the integration process dealing with the shadow, we've almost had to explore, like almost deconstruct in a postmodern way, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? Man face the same problem. I mean, you have a lot of these guys, most of them, their whole value in life was going to be like physical labor and killing. And then you're in the tech world, like, can't be violent because that's bad as a man to be violent. And we don't really, robots and stuff are taking most of the physical labor. I mean, that's a huge crisis in what it means to be a man too. And so we're going through this like deconstruction process, and I think that's why like I always urge so much compassion, because it's like just because a woman hasn't figured it out, or she's not like super feminine at the moment, it doesn't mean that she's not going to be. It's just it's like you have to know at what part in this exploration process you're meeting a woman, and what's her ultimate intention. Because a woman could be like, she could have a really negative intention, and she's just, doesn't matter because she's never going to get out of it, or it's not on the foreseeable timeline. But if a woman's a little bit maybe harder, but she's like it, but she's trying to learn how to soften, like you got to be like compassionate about that and see that you probably, you may have found a really good girl. And the same in the other sense, if a woman is maybe more on the softer edge, but doesn't have enough fire, maybe she's on the process of starting to learn to find that fire. And so anyway,
I think that's where a lot of men get scared, in my experience.
yes,
Because
yeah,
right, like because you can't find that out unless you go find it out.
yeah.
Like you can only look at somebody's social media and know so much about them. People can post all day, every day about their lives and their thoughts, and you still have no context. Like it's scary. And then they go with what seems safer, and that's cool. But like then there isn't enough that fire that you're referring to. And it's also interesting for women because I see more courage and balls in women in this way. Right,
Mm.
they're willing to go explore and check it out and see what's up with some guy and put on the rose-colored glasses enough to just like get in there and see what he's about, because they're looking for that safety in that frame. And
Mm.
like I really feel bad for both sides. Not feel bad. It's just a lot to ask of everyone.
Yeah, it is a lot to ask, and a lot of these agendas are designed to try to create opposition between the sexes, to blame the other sex for it. Like, I have a TikTok account.
Oh yeah.
I don't, I shouldn't say it on air, but yeah, I have a TikTok account. It's a very different demographic of men from what you get on Twitter. And one of the things that's really interesting is that when, with my videographer, I'll do like clips, and he'll put them together and make them, nice and good for modern consumption. Is that the guys really, really are drawn towards, I mean, honestly, they're really drawn towards things that are critical of women. It's like there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain. And I think because, especially when it comes to sex, like I think probably the biggest pain point in source of resentment that men have against women in the modern climate is that women can get laid pretty much when they want to, and men can't. And I try. Well, I mean, not you know, obviously these guys can't. And so, and this is, and I want to talk about this because this is something that I try to help guys understand, that there are different objectives.
Right.
You know,
Oh my
like
God.
if your objective, I don't want to give a bad analogy. I'll let you go. I was gonna give a really bad analogy, but
Well,
but
I
go
mean,
ahead.
no, I experienced the same. Like now that I've actually started, I don't know, I'll just think out loud on Twitter or something. And the thing, like, I'll call women out for something
Mhm.
and everybody loves it. Everyone loves it because the girls are over here like, yeah, that's not me. And the guys over here like, yeah, like I've met so many chicks like that. Da, da, da. And and the same for men, right? Like you'll bitch about men in a group chat full of women that you've been invited to, and it's like, yeah, they never understand it. And it's funny because it reminds me of like the woke culture that everybody criticizes. Everybody's looking for a way to be, everybody's looking to resonate with unfairness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So I mean,
you're just like, there's so many like rabbit holes like with what you say that I'm like, where do I go?
yeah. What is it? So men men are like, sex is power. And so for a lot of men, they feel like it's become a woman's world because with sex liberated, it allows women to, you know, women can pretty much get whatever guy they want, at least for a night, right? At least, and for guys, most of them can't do that. And so there's this sort of, that's an unfairness. What would you say is the reversal of that? Well, first off, talk about it from like the perspective of a woman, and how valuable actually is it from the woman's perspective? And then maybe what would be like the corollary? What is something
Oh,
that
oh, that's
that
a major, major issue in women is like that inability to handle their life force,
Mhm,
right? Like, um, there's a lot of nuance here I used to carry a lot of shame about.
mhm.
Like, I retweeted something you posted one time that was about like, oh, if she hasn't, or she's not, something along the lines of like, if she's not a virgin, that means she slept with 100 guys. Why? I don't know. I'm retarded. And like that resonates with me, right? Because like if you meet a woman anywhere past like 12, like the chances of her, including myself, she's slept with people. And
Mhm,
that's really hard for men to face. And it enters this situation where like it's really gay, but like men are jealous of women, like kind of what you're describing. Like, oh, you can just walk in anywhere and use that sexual prowess and beauty and appeal to draw in people. And it's fair. Like, I'm sure they've been deceived and like there's wounds, blah, blah, blah. But think about what you're feeling. Like, think about what, like, if you actually get somebody to throw their internal dialogue in that situation out loud on paper within conversation with you, or just guide them there or whatever, it's really embarrassing, and
mhm,
it's the problem.
mhm.
And women in the West, like, I love I love American women.
Yeah.
I have American female normie friends. We have a good like. It's hard for me to discriminate, and I should discriminate more.
Mhm,
That said, I love 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 engaging with like non-Western women, because like South American women, Asian women, like they have a little bit of that masculine energy or whatever more in their culture.
mhm.
I mean, obviously, you could say that America has that too, but it's not a healthy way.
Right, right.
In their cultures, it's like it's very normal to embody your sexual power, to talk to people in a way that might be um, flirtatious or
Yeah,
seductive, but it's not inappropriate. Like it's not like, like you exchange some air quotes flirtatious banter with the girl make you pouring your coffee. It's not threatening your marriage type thing, And
right.
like I love that because here everybody's so hyper. They're both. They're super, and I've been a huge fan of. They're super suppressed with their sexual energy, but they're
Mhm.
also very like extreme with it. And it's like you can't, it's literally energy. It's your life force. It's what you create life with and what you navigate life with. And it's what gets boiled up inside you, whether you're triggered by something positive or negative. And 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 yeah, I don't know. I already forgot the question. That's where I went with that. I got
Well,
lost.
Victorian social norms are what led to the sexual revolution. I mean,
What is, I don't know what that is.
so
I haven't
in
studied history enough to
it's
disclaim.
in Victorian England, let's say like latter half of the 1800s into World War One, this was like the Victorian era, and it was known for very, very strict sexual mores, to the extent that like like any kind of position besides for missionary was frowned upon. It was a very, very sexually strict time period, kind of like if you go back to the Puritans in America, very, very similar. After World War One, I mean, World War One had a way of shattering all cultural consensuses, and then you had the 1920s, which was very sexually lax. And so, it started like a little bit of a back and forth fight, and then you had a little bit more strict again in the 1950s. But fundamentally, that set in process this motion of like serious, serious sexual liberation that went to full on degeneracy. And I think what's really interesting is that the countries that have really become the most degenerate were the countries that were also the most puritanical, because it creates this opposite reaction. And also, I think it's a reflection of just an imbalanced attitude towards sex, like not really fully like, my God, like British girls in particular are, I mean, just a horrendous, horrendous hookup culture. Just really like getting shit faced, pass out on the street, go home with some rando. Like I think it's probably the worst. It's probably the worst of the world. But I say all this stuff because it's not like this. Like you're looking at women from South America, from Asia. Um, I say certainly like Southeast Asia for sure. And then you go to even like Mediterranean countries, like in Europe, it's not the same kind of problem. You almost feel like not as much of all this stuff has occurred. People have really balanced it, ridden the wave fairly well. Whereas over here, it's just like,
Oh my God, I'll bring it. That's another beautiful thing about traveling is I'll bring like insecurities in my hindsight to like other countries, and they're like, "What?" Like I've said to, I have a couple British guy friends in the community, and they were jamming with me on this guy I dated last year and why I needed to end it, and I was talking about how I'm too masculine, this insecurity I'd brought, and they were like, "What? What are you talking about?" And that's just an example of experiences I get in engaging with other cultures, and because it supports what you're describing here is like there's not this hypersensitivity to each pole. Yeah.
Now, but do women? I mean, so let's say your average looking plus woman can sleep with most guys, let's say. I mean, I think it's a little bit exaggerated, but let's just go along with it for the
We can.
analogy. What is that? What does that mean to women? Like, do women perceive this as a source of power for them, or is it something that they want? Like, and if they like, because this is one of the things that guys they feel like as a result of that, women can get what they want. And so what is it that women do want? If that's like, is that it? Are they content? I don't think so. But so what is it that they actually want? If you were to take, where I'm kind of going with this, I'm trying to.
Yeah. I'm trying to do. I'm always like, it depends on the person. I feel like every human is a proxy for a way of navigating things. So it's really hard for me to generalize, and I need to get better at it. So this is a good exercise. I think I don't know that. some bright women, I mean, it depends on your self-awareness level, right? Like some women know that they carry that power around. Now, after that, after that level of awareness, you can go in a couple different directions. One of them is like leveraging that, right? And even in that rabbit hole, there's multiple rabbit holes that I recognize as like leveraging that. Does that mean walking in your power, positioning yourself to exude an appeal, like your sexual energy at the core is what it is, but like, or does it take you in the direction of every time you're going through something, like sleeping with someone or like taking advantage of men and like seducing them in like a way that's not going to be sincere or beneficial, right? So it's like awareness is one level for context. Another is like whatever wounds or insecurities drive you to maybe go in a certain direction. I think I mean, it's so cliche in our world, but like women want safety, and it's like a lot of the shitty ways that they navigate things are just misguided attempts to get that, right? Like,
yeah, I definitely want to touch on the safety element. But I guess what I just maybe did, where I'm kind of seeing here, do women, so okay, let's just say it is power. Having men want to sleep with you, being willing to sleep with you, there is some power there. There's some leverage there. Now, how much it's able to be leveraged, what you're actually able to get out of it is another question, besides for the sex itself. And so I think this is where the real question is how intrinsically value, not like the derivatives of the power. That's because that's obvious benefit to that. But how much does it actually improve a woman's quality of life to sleep with whoever she wants to? Like not the potentiality of it, but actually doing it. Do you feel like women who do this, that they feel good about it? Does it actually make them feel good exercising the power?
no, I think each time it's a departure from being in touch with something within ourselves. And sometimes those departures are worthwhile, right? Like, for example, dating somebody for 6 months and you have sex and blah, blah, versus a one night stand that like cultivates a lot of shame within you, then that departure like took something from you a lot, right? Like there's a trade-off that happens. And so obviously in the scenario of a woman just like leveraging this ability to sleep with whoever she wants in whatever situation, like you continue to depart from that internal thing and you become like numb and your internal compass just gets muddied as a woman. And I know women like this. I grew up in hospitality. I've been friends.
It's a great little non sequitur there.
I'm sorry. Like it's just the truth. And like I sending love to anyone who watches this.
If you want to hook up with girls, meet girls in the hospitality sector.
I mean, think about it. Like it's like the perfect conditions for everybody sleeping around, like drinking, intermingling with sexes, like just party. You know what I mean? Like it's just, and it's, yeah. So no, I don't think it's good. And I think I think that's a great thing about men also integrating that intuitive feminine side is you can like pick up on it more. Like I don't know about you, but for me, I meet a woman and I know. Like I know how much she's departed. I guess is hard to say it. And I don't judge. Like I've had friends everywhere on the spectrum from virgin to complete whore. I'm sorry to be abrasive. So maybe that's why I feel like I can pick up on it pretty easily, but like yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, so what is it like? Is it because there's an embedded lie in it that the woman having, it's almost like, is the power actually only in the potentiality, and once it's exercised, it ends up becoming a diminishment of the woman's power?
I think it depends, right? Like I think women are looking to like release this control. We are looking to release this control that we have to navigate life with, right? We just want to like relax into our feminine. And I think if you encounter a situation like that, under whatever conditions, call on it. Like I said, like I mean, I think there's still a recovery phase that
Mhm.
women need when they like if there's a situation like or I'm not talking I think you can have very beautiful, worthwhile departures in the in like romantic events of your life or romantic relationships, like boyfriends or somebody you were seeing for multiple months. Um, and I still think that women need to recover from phases like that, but I don't think that it's like this degraded, shameful recovery. I think it's just more like going back to yourself, or you go in the opposite direction, right? Then you just like start like going off on a shopping spree of whatever. I don't know. Yeah, I do. That's why my whole like I've criticized the manosphere and the red pill and stuff, and like acting up and like projecting on the timeline, like things I was like realizing and understanding about myself and women and life. But my position has never ever been that they're wrong.
Mhm.
My position is that they're short-sighted, and
Mm.
that's when I had to have learn lessons about like this game that's being played on social media. Like you can't just have nuance in one tweet that is a generalization and extremism. And I had to really learn to accept that and like understand that. It was always triggering me. Twitter was such a landmine for me for a long time, and like I would internalize things and I would question things and I would like cope for things that I wasn't even doing because I was confused and lost and like it's those the red pill, the black and white, the feminine, whatever, these things, none of them are wrong. It's just like one idea can only carry certain a certain amount of life in it. And like they are right? Like this whole idea of like we're going to get into the red zone here, but like body counts
Yeah.
and all that. Like it's not like they're wrong. It's just that they're short-sighted and they lack context. And this is why like I have to represent nuance out here. I can't help it. Like it's just
Yeah, I mean, it gets into some interesting metaphysical questions because you can say that, okay, you had a one night stand, um, and maybe it wasn't, you didn't feel like fantastic about it afterwards. But then as a result of that experience, did you then develop some level of wisdom about yourself that made you more integrated and healthier? I think there's a lot of individuals who it's almost like they go on this exploratory path and take our friend Goldman, for instance, who certainly went down a very degenerate path for a period of time and then is really, I mean, returned so much to God that he, got rid of all that stuff. Like he like burned his books, you know what I mean? Like he was really like, but is it fair to say that he would be where he is today had he not gone through that exploration? And has he come out of it as a result wiser and a better partner, better husband for whoever he ends up with? I think that there is something to this. I think the issue is that is it scalable for everybody? I don't know. It takes a certain yeah. I mean, I think there's certain individuals who are very self-aware and are very much trying to learn, and there's like an exploration here, but others just seem to get trapped and it's almost like it's very mindless and they get chewed up and spit out. It's not like they had a phase that lasted for a few months. It's like it was literally their entire 20s and 30s. And so my kind of question here is like,
it's like the ROI of an experience. Like what do you
that's a
do with
good
it
way to look at it.
after
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. That, and I hear this with even guys who talk about, wanting to go out there and explore. And I'm like, yeah, well, I get it. But how much do you need to have like random sex before casual sex before you feel like you've extracted what, you know, novelty and distinction from it? I think it's one of the big paradoxes is people they'll talk about it like it's like, oh, well, you know, you get different girls, it's new experiences. I'm like, is it really new experiences? When I was doing this, I would have the same conversation with different girls. And I knew exactly what to say. I knew exactly how to sequence. It wasn't like I consciously mapped it out. Some guys do that. But like I just knew it. I knew that, yeah, and I'll talk about this. This is how it works. And, you know, how many times do I need to do that? Am I actually having, is it actually new? I don't know.
I mean, it's like I could make the parallel with all my different jobs, right? Like I could have gone deeper with earlier jobs or switched roles if I wasn't just like there's phases of you can also collect, I mean, depending on the circumstances, the same level of experience with like a long-term relationship. Like I remember being in college and like making girlfriends, and I'd only been with one guy. Like I fell in love in high school.
Mhm.
My first love was in high school, and it bled over into college because I couldn't let go.
Mhm.
And I remember talking to girls I was befriending about like sex, and some of them that had like a lot more experience than me, just diversified experience. Like a lot of them I had more experience than
Yeah.
when in my one relationship.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I see, do you see where I see the parallel with that with men? It's like, yes, I do. In my experience, it is good for a man to go through this phase of just like, you know, going around, like exercising their power and like sleeping with a bunch of women and then like being like, all right, I want to settle down. Like I want to go to build a life, blah, blah, blah. Like I see almost all of them reach that point. Um, but I do agree with you that it's not the only way. But I do think that people who stay in very early, like things later, like I have a friend, she's been with one guy, and she suffers from insecurity,
Mhm.
uh, over the fact that he's had his exploratory phase. She didn't. I always tell her this is a beautiful thing,
Mhm.
and she explores life in other ways. Very social person, very beautiful. But that's something that came from her lacking this sexual experience with other people. So it's interesting, right? Like there must be a different fulcrum for each person to where like they're lucky enough. This is where I get all spiritual, and I'm like, if you're meant to get to this intersection of points where like you are lucky enough to encounter the perspective you need to be okay with that, or like not ruin it or depart from it or whatever,
Yeah.
you have what you need, and like you have what you need to build on it in a good way that's going to like set you up well.
Something just kind of occurred to me in this conversation.
Hmm.
I think so a woman's like the feminine power, the feminine being the receiver, the feminine's power from a sexual standpoint is in its potentiality, in sort of how many desire it, how many want it. That's where the power is. For a man, it's in his agency and it's his ability to get that from women, right?
Yeah.
But so that's why it's been traditionally that's not as been as big of a deal for men, but it has been a big deal for women because that's where the feminine, you know, has its power from. But I think that for men, as they become more integrated, there's more of like, because I've noticed this, that one of the big ways to sort of get out of the mindset of like, oh, she's an attractive woman, I have to sleep with her. Like there's a set of my clients who are in the one season, let's say, where they don't have a hard time sleeping with women. They have a hard time really establishing a connection with women. And to a certain extent, you know, they compensate for it by being able to get laid and being able to get girls like that, but they're not like really feeling good in the relationship with women. They're not feeling loved, necessarily love themselves very much. And so for them, one of the big things is learning not to say no to women, saying no, which is a very like feminine thing. But and it's usually accompanied by a lot more emotional release. And so I think that for guys, as they get more balanced, there is more of this like, I'm not going to have sex. I'm not going to have sex. I'm not going to choose you. I'm not going to, just because you want me doesn't mean I'm going to sleep with you, even if you're attractive. I think with women, this is an interesting thing. I'm going to get like kicked out of the manosphere for saying this, but when a woman goes through her own integrated process, there is an element, I think, where she almost feels like when she's getting into her masculine that she has agency and that she can choose to sleep with a guy if she wants to, that she doesn't have to constantly hold it back unless he does all these sort of things. And for some women who get kind of caught at that stage, then it becomes this, they become a slut, basically. Like they might tell themselves that they're being empowered, but they're really degrading themselves. But I do think that there's a certain amount of a woman, and this is why you have the meme about women who are kind of in their late 30s, early 40s, who get to be like, very, very sexual, which I don't think is universal, but I think it exists because a lot of these women are kind of coming into more of that masculine personal power where they feel like they can exercise their sexuality for their own benefit and not just simply as a preservation of their own value. There's more intrinsic value through action than there is simply implicit value through reception. So
absolutely. It reminds me of one time you retweeted me, and it stood out to me because I've been following you forever, but it was something along the lines of like, I was like, men become very powerful when they can turn down sex, and women become very powerful when they can turn down attention.
Yeah, that's great.
And
great.
It goes with what you're saying about like the action and the agency and like we said at the beginning, like it's not safe for women to just let the man come to them because now you have a bunch of men who want to be the prize, and that's supposed to be like the woman, right? So it's like, who's supposed to start here in this world?
And I think that's a cleaner way of saying what I was saying there, because for women it's not like it's a very slippery slope to say that a woman can sleep with a guy if she wants to, and then she's more empowered. It's a super slippery slope. You can get in all sorts of trouble with that. Not even just like in terms of how people perceive you saying it, but in actuality, like it doesn't go well. It's much cleaner to say that a woman who is disinterested, she's more focused on exercising her own agency in life, and she doesn't care what how much attention she's getting, or at least is able to separate herself somewhat for that. And I think this has been an interesting paradox. I mean, not to go too much down the big rabbit holes of today, but all these guys who are looking for really feminine women, well, a lot of the really feminine women, because they didn't have any agency, fell for all the psyops. So I mean, a lot of guys are finding that it's the women who did have more agency, who were a little bit more, got a little bit more fire in them, who are the ones who said no to so much of the bullshit, and that they're the ones that they're actually attracted to. It's like, what am I going to do? It's like, well, maybe you should just allow yourself to be attracted to her, rather than have to like create all sorts of elaborate reasons. I mean, I got to say this. So much of what I do ends up being red pill deprogramming. And it's not red pill deprogramming on like the fundamental stuff. It's just all the bullshit that people project onto it. So like you have a guy who's got a great girl, she's attractive, she's sweet, everything about it's great, but he's like, well, I don't know if she's good enough because she didn't do this thing. And I listen to it and I'm like, you've been programmed to be a retard. Because some guy with like, some Greek statue avatar told you.
Well, they're all over.
Yeah.
One of the anon.
Yeah. Like, don't marry her if, like just total nonsense, total absolute nonsense. It's always like really, really petty stuff. So these guys almost have to, and all of this like constant rhetoric about like the listicles about what women have to do. If they don't do this, don't marry her. If she doesn't do this, what it does is it gives a guy any rationalization to not move forward with his life. to really not have to take any responsibility. Like, it's amazing. I'll hear the objection and I'm like, well, that's mostly your issue. That's mostly an emotional problem that you have. That's mostly fear that you have that she's bringing to life about, and that's good because in a relationship with somebody who you should be with, they are going to trigger you and they're going to trigger the right things about you. They're going to trigger stuff that needs to come out. So, I had a conversation recently with a client. He was trying to figure out whether he should go with his fiance, and he had some kind of issues with her, with some of her, some of the people that like kind of like a spiritual group or whatever. Wasn't really big fan of it, but he wasn't providing any sort of spiritual leadership himself, so he's really negative towards her. Meanwhile, she's really totally chose him, not this other group. But he's like he's not being decisive and trying to set a vision for the family. He's not seeking himself. He's avoiding, and the fact that she's not avoiding is triggering him. And so he's like, how do I stop her from going there? It's like, why don't you?
Oh, that's been a major pattern in my life.
Yeah. So
I can relate to, my heart goes out to her, and like, that's so funny, right? Because like there's more agency in the feminine there.
Right.
But if she exercises that agency, she is punished. And if she is not exercising that agency, she's also not. Like, it's just,
yeah, it's lose-lose for her. I mean, I see this so much with guys, is they're on the fence about the girl, and then it's like, well, the girl, she's kind of wishy-washy, like she's not fully showing her commitment to me. I'm like, but you're not showing your commitment to her. She like rearranged her entire life to be with you, and you're undecided on her, and you're like, like, well, she might be thinking about other guys. Like she might be entertaining like the idea of other people. I mean, nothing at all like serious, like trying to flirt or but just, maybe being a little friendly, little like when some like a little bit more receptive to an advance. It's like, well, you haven't like you've been totally indecisive over her. So what, you expect her to like completely capitulate?
you have to pick whether you want to, like, you have to pick that you want to lead. You can't just half-ass both. And like, although at the same time, I want to contradict myself there, because I imagine the person I marry like will take turns leading, based on like the moment or the situation or like whatever. But overall, like if you want that to be your seat in the house, so to speak, like, what do you think you have to do at the beginning?
Well, I think there's something about the fundamental, like if women are going to be looking to the man to like be moving stuff forward. And it's not to say that, like, I think one of the big misconceptions about male leadership is that means that the man needs to do everything. I think, sometimes some women kind of like that, he gets all the he gets all the authority, let's say, but he also takes on all the responsibility. I see the appeal of that to an extent. But I think one of the big things is that I prefer the sort of captain first mate analogy, because there's so much natural delegation. Like,
Right.
I want to stay focused on the fundamentals. My like I'm gonna publicly cuck myself. Okay, I'm gonna publicly.
I hope you'll even post this, because I've been on a few podcasts where like they say things. I guess
And then they cut it,
and then they don't post it, and I think it's because we get into conversations like this where like people end up saying things that they don't want publicly, whatever. So I'm like, oh, I hope that still posts this right now.
No, I don't give a fuck.
Okay, cool.
And I'm gonna totally get my manosphere card taken away.
I got your back.
Everybody's talking about like, as a man, you gotta like you got to fix this. This is broken. You got to fix it. That's like fundamentals of being a man. Well, guess what? I don't like that shit. I don't like doing it. I've never liked doing it. Okay. I didn't grow up learning how to do it. I don't give a fuck about it. I don't give a fuck about it. And my wife is good at it. And she likes it.
Get it, girl.
So when we got the grill, I let her put it together. I can put together a grill. I don't care about putting together a grill. She wants to put it together. Like early in our relationship, because I had ingested a lot of the same kind of red pill stuff, which tries to box you into some sort of, arbitrariness. I would insist on putting stuff together. And I wasn't bad at putting stuff together.
Yeah.
It was just it would take me longer. She'd be like over my shoulder. She'd be like, "Oh, this is supposed to go here." I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here!" I'm like,
It's also me being in the man right now.
she's like, "Yeah." She's like, I'm like, "You're emasculating me." Like, I'm pissed off.
Yeah.
But then I took a step back and I'm like, I don't really care about this. If you want to do it, then do it. Like, go ahead. I'm gonna go do whatever the fuck I want to do.
Did that
And
feel good, or was it kind of
it
like
felt great.
good?
It like removed a totally unnecessary, arbitrary like point of conflict in our marriage.
Yeah.
Now, I get it. Like, something's broken. It needs to be fixed. But I don't have to fix it myself. If she wants to fix it, I can let her know this needs to be fixed. If it's something that she doesn't want to do, she can't do it, I'll do it, or I'll get somebody to do it. I mean, that's kind of like that's sort of the leadership aspect of it. It's like there are certain things that she's like a tall, thin, like beautiful Polish woman. Like she wants to put something together. Like I don't need to get involved with that because it
Oh, she's Polish. I remember, I'm thinking of a picture I saw you share on the timeline
is
once. She was beautiful.
Slavic engineers.
Cool, cool. Oh, love that. Love that. Love that. And it's so funny, right? Because, like, yes, first and foremost, you are a man and she is a woman. But also, it's really cool of you as a human that your entire way of life and persona and natures and everything doesn't boil down to only your gender.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like, oh shit, my wife is gonna be better at fixing this girl. Like, oh my god, that means I'm not a man. Like,
I think it's important to focus on the fundamental energy. I mean, there compared to a lot of men, I think in some superficial manner, they'll say that I'm not masculine because I don't do that kind of shit. Like I don't so I don't fix that thing. It's broken. I don't do that. Fair enough. Like I get it. I accept the criticism of it. But I take way more risks than most guys. I'm way more aggressive than most guys when it comes to life and taking on challenges. So it's like I don't you can keep your fucking grill. Like,
right.
I don't care. I don't care about it. But this is something that it's difficult because there's so many traps that have been laid when you say that you're not going to identify as like stereotypical masculine traits. Well, then that immediately means like I'm gonna put on women's underwear and act like a pussy. It's like no, that's not what we're talking about here. Like you have to embody the energy. The energy is really important. If you're a guy, if you're like a Jocko Willink and you're gonna be like total stereotypical, like power to you. Like there's a lot of no seriously. I mean,
Everything works.
like he's an alpha. I'm not gonna say any shit about that. But you have to be able to grab onto the fundamental energy. And I think
it sounds so good. It sounds like a dance in your relationship, right? Like if there's a moment where
yeah, there's no, there's a dance. It's like I don't need to, but the way I look at it is that I'm still like overall guiding and directing because I'll part of taking care of it is the delegation. Is it says, okay, this thing happened. Like, do you want to fix it? Like I'm not gonna like order her to do it. It's like, is this something that you want to do it?
I mean, it's like a nuance of frame, right? Like you obviously are fluent in frame, that like the nature of your career that I'm aware of, but is frame limited to holding frame and taking the lead and taking the action, or does it include being able to release the frame because you know you got the frame?
Yeah, I mean,
You know, like
it's releasing control. It's releasing strict control, and I think there's a lot of guys think that they're leading, but they're managing. Often they're micromanaging, and it's very, very different. Like, I don't even really need to do that much theoretically, and I could be leading.
Love that.
So anyway, where was I going with the whole thing? But yeah, we have to be careful about the trap set, and it's done deliberately to manipulate language. So it's difficult to have conversations like these, and a bunch of midwits jump in, they take a clip, and then they, I deal with all the time with like, the Rolo retards and that whole group of guys who it's just everything is super
roast me.
But you gotta figure out your own flavor, because if you're a man, you gotta tap into your masculinity, but you do need to figure out, like, you get the essentials right. And I don't know how to explain this with words, but what I can tell you is that, and I'm curious if it's the same for you with women, you can just feel it. You can feel as a man if you're around somebody else, another guy who's a man. You can feel that they have masculine energy. You can trust that there's an association. And I can tell when a guy's effeminate, or when he's I guess I could say castrated, right? Which are the two flavors I'd say of guys who are really out of balance. I mean, you could have like the bravado and everything like that too, but
right. I fully agree with you.
And I don't trust those guys, but I can trust a guy who I feel like is masculine, even if he does completely different stuff than me. So, I mean, I'd say case in point, not to like justify myself or anything, but I've never had like a guy who's, killed people think I'm a pussy, think because I don't know how to do all the same stuff that they do. Like, in many ways, they look to me.
I mean, I never run into feminine women that are like, I mean, I of course get like random people on Twitter, women that are like upset at something I said, but in general, in real life, like feminine women and my more masculine, I have a more like, honestly, very, very feminine women breathe life into my masculine, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like I have a very strong masculine, very strong feminine. And like, if they're way more feminine than I am, my masculine tends to heighten, and I feel like very protective and like solution. It's so funny. This summer in Croatia, one of my best friends, I'm going to be in her wedding, confronted me as, a friend, like she needed to talk to me about, address something with me. And she disclaimed it. I've only had this conversation with one other person, and it's my best guy friend, which is her fiance. I was like, huh? And it was that she knows, the premise was, it was a long crying heart to heart about, she knows I don't judge her. Like, she knows my heart. Like, she knows that I love her, and she values my guidance, feedback, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes she doesn't want solutions. Right? She just wants for me to listen. And it was such a good moment for me too, because I'm like, oh, like maybe sometimes I need that. And I'm like, so just put the solution there. Like on the I see a bridge here too between what you just said about like emasculating, is like somebody on the timeline brought it to my attention that it's emasculating to explicitly reject a man versus just ghost him. And I was like, oh shit, like maybe that's been something that I do that's messed up. Is like, I'm a very I have this thing that you can feel in other men. I have that. And like, I have no tolerance for elephants. It drives me crazy. My conscience is very like sensitive to that. So I'm such a like address it person. And sometimes, and like people I work with know this about me. I'll be like, oh, spontaneous Trina truther moment. Like, I'm sorry, this is selfish, but I just need to show up and like address this for me. And like, that's what happens, right? Like I'll encounter some sort of romantic prospect and I'll be like, this is blah, 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 and I'll be too whatever. And it's bye. And I'm wondering your opinion on that. I kind of wanted to ask is like, is that something I should compromise? Like, is that right? Like, should I just like, it's more selfish? I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do with that really.
What, like that you always
Like,
try to get, address the elephant in the room?
yeah, like I don't know, or if I'm rejecting a man, right? Is it better if I just full out ghost and don't answer, or to just say, hey, like you're awesome. This just isn't the vibe. Like, but whatever. Like, I don't know. But I never want somebody to just use their like imagination to like, pursue me and me be a waste of their time. Like you need to pursue somebody who's interested too. And me giving you a clear no is, in my opinion, doing both of us a service, because I think that disappointment and pain sits a lot better in the soul if there's clarity with it. But when you're confused and there's pain to process, it just prolongs the healing so much, or the disappointment, not the healing. I don't have to make it that dramatic. I'm sounding super narcissistic right now, but
I remember the first time that I told a girl that I actually totally forgot about this, but the memory just really hit me. Told a girl who I was not interested in seeing anymore that I didn't want to see her anymore. And I remember being like, the tension of having to say that really, like, it was really uncomfortable for me. But I was kind of a pussy back then. Like it was difficult for me to have boundaries and to kind of put somebody out like that, like if I didn't want them. But it felt great afterwards.
right.
It really felt great afterwards. So I from just a general perspective, I think it is better for everybody's mental health when that stuff is put down. But what I'll say also is that it is a masculine thing to do it, because the masculine kind of clarifies. It's not the sort of ambiguity and possibility that is more the feminine. And so one of the things that what I talk to guys about is, because they get really upset about it. It's like, well, first off, learn to read the subtext. Like, you have your answer. You don't need her to say something else. Like, let it go. This is for like most kind of reasonable situations where you've, just met or maybe even didn't meet yet a girl. I mean, it's not like you've been messaging each other and she dropped off, she ghosted. Well, it's like random person you met online. Like, don't get too upset. But what I find is this bigger problem that men, because they're so detached from their own masculinity, they start to look to women to provide it. They get really upset at when a woman acts like a woman. I'm like, okay, well, you want to date a dude? Like,
That's something I trap myself with too, because I obviously exemplify this understanding of men, right? But I'm still a woman.
yeah. I think you're just, you don't come across to me like you're masculine. You just come across to me like you're more integrated. You're more, it's not, I don't, masculine women have much more of a, there's much more of a stiffness. I like, there's a lot of flow to you. I don't, it's just that you know how to tap into the other energy. And I think it's good. I think it's a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. But for most women who haven't gotten there yet, guys should expect the feminine to be feminine. And I actually agree. And with what that tweet that you just mentioned, which, I didn't see, but I do think on a certain level, men don't appreciate, like, okay. I'm sure a lot of women ghost because they're anxious, insecure. They don't know what to do. But part of that is that they don't want to emasculate the guy. They maybe also don't know how to handle the situation. They don't know what he's going to do theoretically. But I think that's overblown. Like, what is he's going to come find me? You know, like, no, it's
I think it depends.
he's going to be angry. Okay, fine. But I think it's fundamentally that they would rather let it be ambiguous and hope that he gets the message. That way, everybody, you know, he doesn't have to be humiliated by an explicit rejection.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yeah.
and I don't think guys appreciate that. They don't. It's like a different perspective. What I would say for women is there's a balance with it. Like, and this is a balance that you can apply to, that anybody can apply to any situation, where it's like, send somebody an implicit message, you know, you're not, if that you're not interested, right? But if they come out really directly saying, hey, can you let me know, are you interested or not? Then answer them and tell them no. Like, if they're, you know, there's like a point, and I think this is where I'm very much on the team with men, where like they'll message a girl, she doesn't respond. They might send her another message, doesn't respond. Now he should get the message at that point. But maybe he sends a third one and she still doesn't say anything, even though he's kind of asked her, hey, what happened? Or like, are you still interested? She doesn't say anything. Like, when that kind of stuff happens, like, the guy shouldn't bother doing it. But if he's at the point of willing to do it, then I feel like the girl is now starting to be like, if she had any concerns about humiliating him, now she's being like, just give him a fucking answer.
Right.
You know, why is like, are you that incapable?
There's two things here, right? There's the tension you talked about with like just addressing it and cutting through the ambiguity. And then there's the drawn out tension of it not being clear. So it's like, maybe for me, that it not being clear tension is way heavier and is my like pattern than the tension of confronting it. Cause it's not like that tension is ever like, it's not like it was ever, hey, I had rejecting you, nothing's wrong about you, bye. Like that's never going to be tensionless. Like, but yeah. And it's tricky for guys too, right? Cause it's like that you also have to discern, like, are you just going to be that direct? You're going to play the game a little. There is a game. Like there's always a game. It was so hard for me to accept for a long time. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you know, guys have to get used to understanding that women have their own, the feminine has their own way of adopting things. And the thing is, I've never seen guys who are really, really grounded, like emotionally grounded. They don't get stressed about this stuff. Like, you know, someone stops responding, they kind of move off. The way I look at this stuff is, if, first off, if it was just a rando, whatever. But if it was someone who there was more of a connection established with, and I don't view it like they're like, certainly I don't, like, I did something wrong, or, you know, how do I get them to respond? It might affect me emotionally, but my feeling is that they're a piece of shit, and then I don't want anything to do with them. Like, it may not be like really charged. It's just that I've now figured out that person's character, and I don't need to have them in my life anymore, or at least have them close to me, so that later on maybe they reach out again. Just like, you know, and I think this is one of the things when it comes to attachment issues for guys. If you're more on the anxiously attached, like, you want that, you need that response. Like, just tell me, just tell me, just tell me. And those guys need to take a step back, but also reframe everything. Like, if you're trying to have a genuine connection with someone and they aren't answering you, like, tactically, yeah, you're going too far with stuff and shouldn't do it. Like, take responsibility for your own part. But then the other part of it is that, like, this is not somebody who's interested in having a emotionally connected relationship. You know, they're pulling back for the power of it. I mean, whether they want to acknowledge that or not, like they're people, someone tries to get close to them, either they're avoidant and they clam up, they want to get away from it, or, they just like the sense that the other person is so desperate.
And I think in situations like this, we both share a couple strengths, which are like in that scenario, if we were ourselves are in it, it's like we have plenty of other things to pay attention to, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not sitting around waiting for this answer. And another strength is something you gift people and I give people, which is perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if you have the right perspective, you're not going to sit there and just like fixate on this thing. I guess it all goes back to grounding. You have activities and interests and books and hobbies that ground you and you can pay attention to versus just stare at your phone and wait for a response. Or you have somebody in your life that can gift you the right perspective to like not be doing that and like release you from that fixation. And also both of those things only go so far too. Like nothing is limitless. Like eventually you just have to take some sort of action if there's that. I think elephants can be very internal too. And it's like, you're going to unaddressed elephants inside are going to weigh you down. Your conscience is going to get super heavy and like, you're just going to drag it around forever. And there's so much opportunity cost with that, which is really sad.
Yeah. The more, this is almost more related to like business stuff, although it certainly applies over, but the more successful I've become, and the more I've interacted with other successful people, it's just there's a very different communication expectation. People are less insecure about responses, and they, the responses tend to be, this is like the famous kind of meme about like this, like the CEO, like, you send this like very formal email and the CEO says like, cool, like TY,
PLS.
Yeah.
Whole message in the subject line.
Yeah, exactly. Like just totally informal, speed oriented. They just don't really care that much. They don't stress about it. And I think that there's just that self-assuredness that you realize that everybody's busy. And like when I was selling wine at one point, and it was really frustrating because like I'd email people and I'd want a response. Like I had to deal with this flaky stuff all the time. You go and present wine. Oh yeah, I really like that. I like that. Yeah. And then you go follow up and, most of the people wouldn't even respond, or, it would take a while to get them to respond. And while I really, really did appreciate the fact that people did give a response, and even now, like I don't know if you get it or not. I mean, I'm very much a explicit business on Twitter. I was getting like 1 a day. Now I'm getting like 3 offers a day for the exact same kind of shit over and over again. All, good guys trying to hustle. I respect it for the most part. I got some guys are retards. I got one was really and I made fun of him. But usually they mean well. And I really try to respond to all of them.
Oh, you do. You're so nice.
I can't. Hey, man, I appreciate the offer, but I'm good. Just because I know what it's like to be on the other end, and it's just so frustrating.
Yeah.
To be messaging someone, never getting a response, and I know how it felt when like they did respond. But I guess the point of all this is that there were some of them. Like I remember, I have to go into the store to talk to them because. Like just to like put a little like, hey, what do you think? Like, I'd literally have to walk like a couple miles, take the subway, like take 30 to 60 minutes out of my day just to go to their location and each way. And
makes a lot of sense.
And because I kind of know when they were there and I'd meet them there. And sometimes they'd be like all about it. They'd be like, oh yeah, thanks. Like, they were just really, really busy. They actually were really, really busy. And I said, oh yeah, I sent you an email. I was like, I have 300 unopened emails. It's like, cause they just were getting so much. And there is this sort of saturation thing. And I think that you get like people who are less secure, and usually that's obviously less successful. it's like they imagine that everybody's thinking about them when they send this stuff, and that makes them self-conscious, making them think that they did all this stuff wrong. But it's also just completely delusional.
Right.
Like, valuable people are so busy. Like, if you can get their attention, you can get something to execute on it, they'll go with it. And in case in point, when I was selling wine, it was always the best sommeliers. If you could get their attention, they're fantastic. They're like the big store owners. If you could get their attention, they were really a pleasure to work with, because they would execute really quickly. You just had to, get their focus on whatever. It was like the smaller stores, or like the sommeliers who were, clearly not going to get to the top restaurants in New York City, and they were schmucks most of the time.
Yeah.
And because, they're like, I have the power. It was like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, I mean, there's so many thought catalysts in life. Like, even when you're not, I don't know about you, but when I'm not busy, like, I can just forget to reply.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a ridiculous amount of communication channels, and I'm a Twitter addict and all these different things, but and I'm super social. So like on my birthday, oh my God, I still haven't replied to everybody. Like, because I've spent my life like this. Right. So it's like, even without those conditions, and if I'm just like phoneless, like taking a walk, like there's a constant, like, everything. And it's just so silly what you're essentially doing in that state is assuming that some remote person's attention you're entitled to their attention synchronizing with the moment that you decide to reach out to them. That's impractical. It's selfish. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't matter how important you might be to them. That is not a realistic expectation. And yeah. And it does cause a lot of insecurity. The Psalm thing reminds. I remember you saying something on Twitter about like leaving wine or whatever, but that was another thing that always stood out to me all the time. Because my mom's a Psalm, super like French Burgundy lover. And
oh man, I'm coming over.
Like, I got her Sea Smoke cult wine for her gift for Christmas, and that was like her favorite gift that she's ever gotten.
Yeah.
Like, you don't drink wine anymore, right?
No, I do. I took a 5-month break, and that was fine. And then, like I said I would do at Thanksgiving, I started drinking again. But I don't drink as much as I used to.
Same. I used to drink a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'll still enjoy. It's still probably more than is ideal, but it's like,
you have so much life force inside you. That's why. Like, it's not like you're. I mean, you see, I wouldn't assume that like a primary incentive for that for you is coping, right? Like, you're familiar with healing and inner work, and you have your family and your career, and like.
I think last, like, before I took the break, there was an element of cope, because I'm, I don't really talk about, I'm not like a complainer, but like, I'm under enormous stress, enormous amounts of pressure due to all sorts of personal situations, which I know you're aware of. But it's, and I think that started, that maybe it had been there before as like kind of an escape. It's not an escape now. Like, I don't even have much of an urge to drink it, except when I'm like celebrating with somebody. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna like go have fun.
That's how it is for me too now. I'm glad it's changed into that for you.
Yeah. And I think the reset was really important, not only just for healing, but just kind of perspective. And I might do it again. I mean, actually, I haven't announced it on Twitter yet, because you have to announce these things on Twitter, because if you don't announce it on Twitter, it maybe didn't even happen. Nobody even knows about it. But I'm going to be doing my longest fast ever, starting on Monday or Sunday evening.
Oh shit! How long are you going? 200
hours. So it's going to be.
Oh my gosh! Okay, what inspired that?
Spiritual components of it.
Cool.
Spiritual components. You really get a good channel open, and I once this year started, so between Thanksgiving and New Year's, like it was honestly a pretty big party. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of, um,
Holidays, man.
yeah, I had a big wedding, New Year's. When I came back, I did a 3-day fast, and then I've been fasting 1 day a week since the beginning of the year.
Me
I
too.
did another 3-day fast in the beginning of February, and I just kind of felt like I should do it. I think it would be good for my body. You know, I feel like I'm somebody who's all things in moderation, including moderation. Like if I'm gonna go party and party hard sometimes, I'm also gonna completely fast. And I think that's something that like I'm gonna balance it out in one other way. And I don't want to be like the person who's like binge fast. But I think that there's like eh, there's benefit to like if I'm gonna go through a feast period and then like a normal period and then just to do a little, I don't know. I felt called to do it is the short answer, and I
No,
don't tend to ask too many questions when that
no,
happens.
I love that. It fully resonates because that's how I agree. Like I mean, it's just a constant oscillation between different ways of being, and because I think being able to move through all those helps you not like the pendulum swings less hard versus just trying to spend your entire life in one of those modes, like this party mode, party drink, indulge mode, just purist mode, just this is like I just have to hop around them and like make sure like if I was gluttonous and drank today, like maybe I'll fast tomorrow and just nose to the grindstone. Just like that's just constantly like balancing it out. So I like that. I respect that. I just think most people can't relate to that because they can't handle shifting like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely a mental it's definitely a mental thing. And I use it to it's like it's also like a challenge for mental toughness.
Yeah, I'm excited for you. That's what I thought. The first thing I thought when you said it, I was like, that's going to be a challenge that you get to conquer next week.
You know, I did when I did that hike in the Appalachians, which was
Hmm.
miles, and that was completely fasted. And that was only 158 hours, but it was because of all the hiking. I mean, it was just literally hiking all day long. I I feel like it was probably more accelerated. Like I probably went through the fast stages a lot. I don't know. In practical terms, it might have like been double that. I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but what I know is that when I got to the end of that fast, like the last 2 to 3 days, I mean, the mental clarity was just it was unlike anything. Mental spiritual clarity. It was like I brought like philosophy books with me and I was just tearing through them. Like
Oh.
it was like supercharged IQ. I felt like Flowers for Algernon. I don't know if you know that book. Oh, this is a classic book. Just like it's tragic. Like I can't read it without crying. I think there's a movie on it.
Wait,
It's
what is it called? Flowers of what?
Flowers for Algernon.
Aldranon.
I mean,
Interesting.
Algernon, yeah. It's basically the story of this mentally, retarded guy who they then give this breakthrough treatment, and then he not only recovers his intelligence, but he becomes like super intelligence. He becomes like a genius, and then, but the thing is that the drug didn't work long term. So then he starts to go back down and go back to his prior state, and it's very moving. It's a very moving story, and that's what I felt like. Like I was
Yeah,
like
that kind of makes it enticing. I want to experience that.
level, and I'm like, wow, like, and now I only understand that I don't understand like I did before.
Yeah.
Like,
Ascension.
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, I
cool.
felt that spiritually too. I don't know. Have you ever had like have you ever gone to like a peak state spiritually and then like crashed down from it?
Literally, the first thing I thought of was shrooms when you said that. Is that what
Oh
you
yeah,
mean?
yeah. I've never done shrooms. I've never done any psychedelic.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's what you meant. I've never done a long fast like that. I feel like I'm way too moved by like everything that happens to me. But yeah, one time I had this trip on the beach and it was during a really unhealthy time in my life, like working hospitality, like just drinking every night and eating whatever was there, just working myself to the bone, and like super couldn't have like quiet time with my own thoughts. Like if there was an empty shift to pick up, I was picking it up. If there was a party to go to, I was there. And I went to the beach with like 3 of the people I was closest with. And I just remember like staring at the sky. Like I saw, this is gonna R-rated, but like I saw the sunset have a visual orgasm. And I had like, oh my gosh, I was so, they tried to hand me a joint, and like they were laughing after telling me about how I would like hold it for 1 second. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I've been holding for this so long. Here, take it. It's yours. Like, I want you to have it. And they're like, Trina, you haven't even had your time with it. And I'm like, oh. And I was like profusely thanking everything. I was like, thank you, water, for hydrating me. Thank you, body, for like all the shit I put you through. Like, thank you, sand, for being fun to play in. Like, thanking everything. And like that experience, oh my gosh, it took me days. I called out of work, like, and I was after recovering, I called out of work because I was just still coming down from this. And this is dangerous territory to even say out loud, because I'm not trying to condone the whole like, yeah, you need to like fix your consciousness by like tripping balls. Like, no, that's not what I think at all. But that's the first experience I thought of when you told me that, because coming down from that and having moments with myself in that trip of like, take care of yourself, like take better care of yourself. Some like internal, like inner self type shit. Like, and it took me so long to come down from that. But I have sober days too, where I'm just so like rocking and like floating on air and like just vibing so high and walking around life, and like I'll spew it out on the timeline. It's like, what are you on? It's like nothing. And it's just some of those days, and I'm just so tapped into something and like so whatever. And then the next day I'll wake up more normal, and I'm like, oh, it feels like I'm coming down from something. And I'm like, yeah, it happens all the time. Like, it's honestly very, very, very normal for me.
You know, when you were telling that story with the sun, I was having like profound deja vu. It was very, very eerie. like the whole, yeah, very weird, very weird.
Want to share it or no?
No, I mean, it's just I when you started to talk about the joint and holding it up, oh, I'm so sorry, and then you were talking about like how you were like, it's like I knew you were saying it, like I had this really profound deja vu, and it was freaky.
Weird.
Try to keep it together, but it was very freaky.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. One of the first things I wanted to say when I hopped on this podcast was that a long time ago, I had a feeling that one day I would talk to you.
Oh yeah.
And that sounds so creepy that I would probably never say that out loud. But here I am saying it out loud. So thanks for going first.
No, but it's true. Like I kind of like invited you to do this out of the blue. So
yeah,
it's not like I had this vision that you were gonna do it, and then you're like,
well, I reached out to you first because I thanked you for some sort of perspective that you shared.
It was innocuous. It was not, you didn't ask for anything. Yeah.
That's like universal shit.
That's right.
I mean, that's part of why you've stood out to me, right? It's like this, the manosphere interests that I've navigated, and the nuance that I love, and the wine thing that you've talked about, and the personal development relationships thing that I'm interested in. And it's also the spirituality. Like there are no, and like the only other men that I like see rep spirituality, like just don't, I don't know. They don't have the other like grounded, red pill friendly, like perspectives. It's just this whole web of things that you rep. And it stands out to me. And it's so cool. Like that you, I don't know. It's so cool. So I remember feeling a long time ago, like one day I'm going to have a conversation with that.
But I appreciate that. And I'm happy you're on right now. I want to actually tackle a few more topics before we close out. If you're good, you got another.
Yeah, I'm super down.
Okay. So one thing I wanted to hit on, and we got close to it, but then we went on this fun little tangent, was we're talking about women and, you know, high notch count and everything. And because you hear this a lot in the manosphere about how, you know, once a woman has that kind of number, she's kind of done. Like it shows on them. Can a woman recover from being used sexually?
I have seen, yes. And I have seen, so I'm thinking of 2 examples in my mind, and one of them, yes. But that woman is resilient as hell. Like, I mean, it's part of what made her resilient, right? Like going through that. And maybe there's like struggles from it that I don't see because I don't like know her behind the scenes life, but I can only think of one example. And then there are other examples that I worry about what the answer to that is, right? Like, is there a too far gone? Is it fair to feel like there's a hopeless point for a person? For a
Yeah.
life? Like, I don't know that I don't feel right about that, but maybe it's true. I don't really care to land on a conclusion about it because for me, that's not my nature. Like, I would never look at somebody and be like, you're done. Like that's so fucked up to me. Sorry, like for my language, but I'm like delusionally hopeful for people, right? Like I don't. This reminds me of how I think when you first followed me, I was bitching about Johnny Depp case on Twitter, and like there was something about like, okay, ideally things go from A to B this way, and like nobody can ever be redeemed. But that hasn't been my experience, and that hasn't been the realities. I've stepped into a lot of realities just with my nature of life that's been kind of summarized here, and that's never. I don't know. Like maybe I don't. I have a lot of long-term friendships. Like maybe I haven't seen them in 10 years, but like my birthday, like I had people that had regulars that I was serving at 13 text me, like long things. Like your fingerprints like don't fade from the lives you touch. Like and you could make the argument like maybe you didn't see how that ended up culminating, or maybe like redemption, whatever. But like no, in my experience, like from the looks of it and like the feels of it, redemption is absolutely possible. And so I don't believe that maybe there's ever, and I think that if you're interested in the world being rebirthed in a certain way, and you really want people in like the other fellow humans of like the world to transcend this bullshit that we've all either been born into or totally just gotten into of our own agency, whatever it is, like if your ultimate interest is in people being better, like I don't think it's fair to have that perspective. Does there need to be a limit? Yes. Like you can't just like savior complex it up, but I'm talking like the right positive negative reinforcement with people. Like if you just see somebody as there's no chance for them, they might as well be gone, right? They might as well be dead.
Well, right. I mean, if we start writing every woman off, then we're gonna have to start writing like almost every man off. I mean,
right.
There's a lot of, maybe by different criteria, but and then some people will say yes to that. I'm like, okay. I mean,
we're in really tricky territory right now.
It's not entirely incorrect. I mean, I'm, there's the expression about like we're going through a very tumultuous period. It's a war. It maybe isn't as physical kinetic. Obviously, it started. It might go more, but fundamentally, war begins in the ether before it comes down to the material, right? And that's why it always starts with like information and propaganda, or rousing speeches and stuff like that. It always precedes it because you have to generate enough energy, enough consent to actually do the fight itself. But I'm not I'm not convinced that everybody's going to make it. I'm just not. I think that this is selection pressure, and I think a lot of people are being pushed to their limit, and they're finding their inner strength, and they're going to come out superstars in the coming decades. And I think others are just going to get crushed under the weight. Everybody is being tested to their limit, and it's literally, if you can't spiritually evolve right now, I'm not very bullish on your long-term future. But what I will say with like, for instance, the notch count thing, I do think it's possible for anybody to heal from anything, but you have to, it's all about, you can see it in them. You can see whether or not they um they choose to. And I think that the hardest part for a lot of women is the combination of, is needing to be honest with themselves about what they've become, what they've done to themselves. And I think, dishonesty doesn't have a sex, but I do think a lot of women will like play with healing, but they try to stay away from the brutally honest truth, which is the real thing that sets them free. Um,
That's the worst, and it's so bad. It's like everybody's trying to use these fluffy versions of healing to represent healing to themselves and collect that positive like validation for it, but it's so bad because it has, I mean, I've done this like when I was healing extremely like core parts of myself, like social media was such an embarrassing liability looking back on it, right? Like you do like shadow work on a stage that like everybody can witness, and you rep yourself poorly and you spew out takes that people are like receptive to, and it's so, oh, it's so crazy. And so now like it sucks that like language is such a boundary to me, like, or not a boundary, a limitation to me, because like what other words do you have to describe things like the feminine, the masculine, healing, therapy, blah blah, but like those, all the terms are so defiled, and it's unfair to not let people have those associations with words like that, because
mm.
what are they supposed to do? Like there's words and meaning, and the more you're exposed to things, that's the meaning of it, right? Like, oh.
Well, yeah, I think, and I'm curious what you think about this. I mean, one of the, so I explored a lot of like the new age circles just in order to try to get more experience with feminine energy, understand the other side of the coin. You're going to be in circles about male self-improvement, but then if you're going through integration, there is this spiritual emotional component. So I looked there, and I found some really great stuff. I don't want to like, pretend it was fruitless effort, but there's just an enormous amount of bullshit in the new age space, enormous amounts of bullshit. And it is, if the manosphere has its sort of like masculine posturing bravado bullshit, the new age community has its oh God, there's such a perfect word, and I'm duplicity.
Mm.
And
Yes.
because they don't want, it's such a feminine space. Like, if you get into some sort of circle community thing, you're likely dealing with 70 to 80% female to male ratio. Um, of that, half the men are completely neutered. And then the other half are maybe considered to be sexually desirable, but they are in a feminine space, and they are at the behest of the feminine. And so you want to do some sort of healing thing. Now, there is the feminine healing and emotional release related work. Fair enough. Very powerful stuff. But there's so much bullshit. They're so afraid of triggering. And it's gotten worse, I think, since a lot of the female pain has been hijacked and co-opted by like wokeism and all that kind of stuff. But you'll have women come in there, and then they'll share something, but they're not sharing it to actually heal. They're sharing it to be accepted.
Mm.
And as a result of their intention, they won't accept challenge, because if they were to be challenged, like, they're not actually interested in fixing their, you know, their emotional problem or dealing with their bullshit. They just want to be validated for being there. And so if you were to kind of call them out, they would not handle it well. And And actually it becomes a really hostile place for truth. So they'll say like, okay, now you're going to play the masculine, you're going to play the feminine, but it's like you're playing it's like you put the masculine in a cage. It's like, here's a puppy dog. It's like, this is the masculine. It's like, no, the masculine's a wolf, and you're not going to put him in a fucking cage. Like, he's going to come in there and he's going to tell you exactly what you need to hear. And however you take it is however you take it. I can do that in, like, when I've had circles with men, the contrast and the energy is just absolutely incredible. And I can tell you that, and this is, I don't know what is, if that has that been your experience. I imagine that you've probably been in some of those.
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that feminine energy is more under the surface, like covert, right? Whereas like I prefer an overt, blatantly shitty person over a covert evil.
Yeah.
And so obviously what facilitates covert more is feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wonder like what those lines are. And I don't care. It's another thing I don't care to land on a conclusion with. It's that, should I be perceiving this as evil? Bad, like evil energy, or like where does the line exist between evil and somebody operating out of their wounds and like they just don't have the capacity to be honorable or confront truth or whatever it is in their point in their life? I never really care to like land on a conclusion. I just know what I am, what doesn't sit right with me. And yeah, that's my opinion on that.
No, I mean, I think it's a really good question, and theologians in the past have been drawn to the conclusion that the feminine is where evil resides. You know, it's the right versus the left, right? And I don't accept that premise, although I understand it in that specific context, how, you know, if you're viewing it through the sense that the feminine doesn't want any sort of boundaries, the feminine is formless and therefore anything is possible, so that you can't nail it down, whereas the masculine's more structured. This is right, this is wrong. But you know, the masculine, I think that the conflation is, it's really more the integration of the energies, because, you know, as we're talking here, we're talking about nuance and possibility, but we're getting to truth, and that's a blend of the two things, because you're seeing that the truth is this way in this one situation, it's different in this situation. The masculine tends towards codes of laws, which, you know, you can argue in certain times and contexts, you know, we're doing it again, but argue in certain times and contexts that was triage, right? Better to have some structure that everybody can go around, even if it is distorted. But I mean, I think that what we're seeing right now is, on one hand, the utilization of the feminine to sort of distort and so confusion, and like everybody's a victim and everybody's experience needs to be validated, blah blah blah. But on the other hand, you're using the hierarchical structure of masculinity to, you know, be to be certain, like I would say, without justice. You know, you're using structures that are designed to offer justice but you're actually providing injustice with it, because they're so improperly utilized. But that's the law, you know. It's like this kind of stuff. So it is more about the blend of this stuff. And to be honest, like with these spirituality communities, I don't mind, like, there's a place for this sort of feminine healing, which is like, we care about you, we love you, we accept you. Like, that is not valueless, but set the parameters and intention. What are you trying to accomplish? Do you want to have a community where you feel accepted, and where, you know, you didn't get that kind of love or affirmation, so you're looking for it? Fine. Or do you have an emotional problem and you want it to be solved? Do you want to have your blind spots called out? If that's the case, then you have to take the shackles off the wolf and let it's and that's the thing. I think even these communities have, and it's a broad community. I don't want to overgeneralize because some segments of it don't have this problem, but there has been so much of like we're sensitive to people's experience that it's just become nonsense, and you can't heal in a dishonest environment.
No, there's a difference between like contradiction as coming from like the truth to be found in paradox.
Mm-hmm.
And the contradiction that comes from people, whether within themselves or in a community or a group, switching positions
Mm-hmm.
to cope
Yeah.
for emotional turmoil and for being full of shit and for being wrong and oh, that's really tricky to discern unless you have like some kind of like the two things, the experience and the awareness for it. And just
Yeah.
people so not out of tune with themselves, they can't even just like sense it. Like they're clawing at the air for like some sort of map for it all.
Mm-hmm.
I do agree that like we're in this big collective death rebirth right now. And it resonated when you said that the people who aren't doing this work, yeah, it just won't be good for them. It's hard for me to say. But and it's funny because I know people who do this kind of work and don't even like the word spirituality and like inner work never even crosses their lips, right? Like they're just like a growing person.
Yeah. And I know ones who like they talk about like in light, and then they're like, please wear a mask.
Oh.
Like,
Oh my gosh.
really?
I'm so
Really?
excited for that to be over. I visited Austin recently for the first time and I saw more masks there than I see here in Florida. And I was like, oh, so overplayed.
Yeah.
So overplayed.
But I mean, I look at these people as casualties of war. Like their minds were broken. And I don't know if they're gonna repair or not. I mean, it just depends. It depends on the individual, but I think a lot of them have already made too many bad decisions. And eventually, I mean, you can already start to feel it. It's already turning. And it's very interesting times, and I think that we chose to be here during them. And it's interesting to me, like all this work, all this exploration stuff with like coaching. I'm sure this is the same for so much of your stuff. Like got into it with a certain like, oh yeah, you're exploring it yourself. Oh, this is good. Then you start to get into it to help other people. And then you realize it's really about part of something that's like just so much bigger. And but it was there to prepare you for all that stuff.
I just got chills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy. Like it's so, I wish it didn't sound so cliche to describe, but yeah, I'm fully, I don't even know how to put words on it. That's why like I don't really relate, and I talk about this on Twitter a little bit, but I don't really relate with regret. Like I literally can't think of a single experience that I would trade in to change history that didn't, like, kind of goes back to the ROI thing, right? Like I've had a stand that I regret, and I wouldn't take it back because after that, like really great things for me happen. And if I had to trade those in to like take one person off my notch or whatever the fuck it's called, like I wouldn't. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like,
It's especially because like I think that when it comes to regret, if people who are like, oh, I regret, I should like this thing that I did or this experience. Well, it's like, well, if it has such an emotional imprint, that means it transformed you, and you shouldn't regret it. If you're gonna regret anything, like regret the mindless periods where you don't even recall what happened. Like, there was like all that wasted time. If you're gonna regret anything, regret that. Don't regret like a bad experience.
Yeah, I so vibe with that. Like numbness and just lack of presence and not even living. Like what a waste.
Yeah.
but you're
Like all
here
that
to,
stuff you just forgot. Like
yeah. I super agree. And I feel like that's extrapolated to what we were kind of talking about with the world right now. Is like, this is supposed to happen.
yeah.
This is supposed to happen, and this is supposed to, and it's super painful, and it sucks, and like, there's a lot of casualties, and it's really painful to witness that. Like, my parents are super plugged in,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really hard to understand, or not to understand, to just to look at.
Yeah.
And when you can wrap your head around the fact that there's like a broader thing going on that's even bigger than what my family means to me, like right in the feels, you know, it's yeah, it's just nuts.
And I really do think as we go through it, men and women are going to come, they're going to come closer together. There's going to be, I think by the end of the decade, I don't think that you're going to see all this, like this same level of sort of sexual confusion. I don't even mean that in terms of like the alphabet soup. I mean it in that as well, but I mean it in just the sense of how we relate to each other, how we relate to ourselves. Like, I think as we get into the 2030s, we're going to start to have that stuff more figured out. And relationships are going to be healthy again because there's going to be enough that's been borrowed from the past that we know works. Or like, okay, like I'm a man, you're a woman. We both know what we know what we want from, like, we understand what like a man's desires are, and we also can layer that with our own personal desires, and it's not going to be this like you either fit into this box or you're in this box. like like for instance, a lot of, this is going to get this video removed from YouTube, but I won't go too far into it, but part of the whole thing with men being homosexual, aside from abuse, and I do think that there's some natural component to it, but I think a huge slew of it is that a lot of these guys are more sensitive men, who can't relate to, like, they're almost, there wasn't space for them to develop in a more healthy manner, and so it kind of like they maybe felt rejected from men, and so then they came to fetishize it.
Mm.
And there's all sorts of stuff when you go into like with the parents as well, but there's an element here, like, and I think, and just to give credit where credit's due, I'm kind of paraphrasing Bronze Age Pervert, but it was a really interesting argument with it, that a lot of these men, maybe in a different time period, they'd have like they'd have like a frontier to explore. There'd be something that they could, like, their creative energy could go into, and now it just gets kind of bottled up.
Right.
And
Like, then they didn't get that initiation into like manhood in any way.
yes,
Or they
and
failed the initiation.
yeah, they failed the initiation, and I think, and so they became really effeminate. It's just like it's a distortion of sexual energy, I think, fundamentally, is what it is. I know people are going to get pissed off when I say that, but it's not that straight people don't have their own distortions in their sexual energy. It's just that I haven't seen a ton. I'm not saying it's not possible. There's always possibilities, but let's just say it's fundamentally less clean. And I don't mean that even in like a physical sense. I mean it in like an energetic sense. There was some stuff on the timeline just today, and it's totally true. It's that guy, Gucci Bucket Hat, who's got all sorts of
Oh my gosh.
hilarious, like totally not PC stuff. But, it's very connected fundamentally to degeneracy. Like, I think he said that a lot of where gay culture went to, that set the seeds for degeneracy around straight people. It's like, you can't be a degenerate. I think his exact tweet was like, you can't be a degenerate unless you and be anti-LGBT. Like eventually you kind of just become part of it. And he talked about how people who, and I've seen this with like some of the pickup artist people who are all about like trying to get laid and fuck girls, and they've gradually sort of been outed as either, I think it's what's Troy Francis. I mean, he was on Grinder, he's banging dudes. Like it's a really common thing because you know eventually the degeneracy wormhole just takes them all the way down there. They start to swap partners. It just really.
Yeah, like because it doesn't do enough for you for it to just be at a certain level. You have to take it farther.
Yes, exactly.
I've even seen this in women. I went from private school to public school. My mom went through a divorce, and one of my chick best friends at the time, we would talk about, it was like my first experience of like boys.
Yeah.
And we would talk about boys. So that was like a primary thing, memory of the friendship. And then years down the road, I went to an art show. Oh, no. Between me running into her in the art show and us being best friends in middle school talking about boys, she came out of the closet. She was lesbian. She cut off all her hair. A lot of women, And then years down the road, like after college, I think I was like working at a bar or something. And I went to an art show and I ran into her and I was like talking about her. She had her baby. She was talking about her husband and like, super, like whatever, And I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of the comment was like, I realized it's not just men, or I realized I wasn't women type thing. That was what I got from it. I don't know what the exact words were. And it was so interesting to me because I like legitimize, like in contrast to what we're talking about, like I always had like gay friends, like growing up in like the art scene and like hospitality, whatever, like super legitimate. But when you start thinking, when I encountered that, I was like, interesting. It was like so much pain from the masculine that the feminine felt like the only safe place. But because there wasn't the both, it was a really tumultuous, degenerate time. And then it went back and it was like a beautiful landing place. So that was interesting.
I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna go even to another level because it just occurred to me. And so 100%, so much of lesbianism is fear and kind of like terror of the masculine, right? Lack of trust and feeling like, okay, so these women, they want to spend more time with women away from men because they don't trust men. And so, the sense of feeling connected and belonging, they're like, oh, okay, this becomes something that maybe I'm a lesbian because I want to be with women. But I think so much of this fundamentally comes from the fact that men and women don't have their own spaces anymore. And so these women, I think very often there's different, I don't want to, because there's different flavors, but I'll just say at least that many lesbians, at least not maybe the old school ones as much, but like certainly the ones that have been coming to the forefront the last 20 years, that whatever's been happening now, so much of it just seems like these girls are looking for like space for men. They're looking for sisterhood. They're looking to have like to not feel like they need to do something with men, or I think even in some ways it's a response to hypersexualization. It's almost like a defense mechanism that I've seen. Like girls who are more anxious, don't want to date, or sexually insecure, they want to be lesbian because then the pressures may be off of them. And I think a lot of those girls ultimately go through maybe what your friend went through, where they get closer to women, they realize that, women are not all, they don't feel safe around men. Well, you can't feel safe around some of these women either. And you have to learn to assess people based on their merits. But
yeah, I think that last part is extremely important, right? Like you can't only assess people on their gender. And it's like the flip side of all this cultural shit going on. It's just a different mutation of it.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been really messed up. I think everybody's been we're all pretty fucked up.
Stop.
Not singling out LGBTQ. Don't worry, guys. We're
No,
all
no,
fucked up.
no,
Okay. Some are a little more fucked up than others. Not just joking.
no.
Just
I mean, same for any of you. I said I had that moment with one of my first air quote mentors. She was like my second mother. My childhood best friend's mom was a therapist.
Mhm.
And when I was growing up, I went through like dark things. Like I had an abusive ex stepdad, and like my mom was very absent work type, whatever. And I would always stay with them, and they were like my family. And she was a therapist, and we would talk. And she was like the first. I credit her for my interest in psychology, but she said that it was I was predisposed or like super like fixated on human nature, and like growth has always been my number one driving factor type shit. So she credits me, I credit her, whatever. But one of the like I started learning myself, and I'm like learning of the like mother wound, like daughter shit, like very, very young. And I remember like started navigating life with it. And I came back to her, and I'll never forget this moment. And I just was like, I feel like everyone's fucked up.
Mhm.
Like I saw wounds in every single, and I didn't mean it in a bad way. Like I meant it in like everybody has their shit, you know? And I remember her looking at me like, oh, honey. And she just like hugged me. And I just will never forget that moment. And it's true.
Yeah. And so this is to kind of like end it on this last topic here. I got to go in the next 10 minutes. But I think it's been this big question about we've been fucked up, but have people always like, because we look back, it's like everybody's got a problem now, but people didn't used to have these kind of problems. And I do think that part of it is due to lack of structure and this flux of us trying to have to almost rediscover and renegotiate sort of like what it means to be us on this planet, because because the consciousness is going up. This is the thing, and where people like will debate with me about it, and I get it. I get it, because if you go back 100 years, um well, I mean, maybe not 100 years, we're in the aftermath of World War I, but if you go to like didn't look pretty civilized then, but if that let's say pre-World War I, sort of peak Belle Epoque European, Western culture, right? I you know there's a certain element of the consciousness is higher now than it was then, and people are like, how can that possibly be? Because everybody then was like, everything was so much more healthy.
Hmm.
Just because you look at society, you didn't have all this kind of craziness and stuff that's going on right now. But I really think that this is because we're having to, like, we're on the cusp of a golden age. We really are on the cusp of a golden age. It's just that our consciousness, we're navigating this collapse of the old structure, and we're trying to become the people who can build the new structure. Like, you want to have a golden age. Golden age is downstream of the people in the society and their level of consciousness. And so we have to change in order to get there. If we want to bring it about, we have to change in order to get there. You could say maybe at that time period, there was maybe peak of like the consciousness had gone to a certain point and all the structures were able to kind of keep pace with it, but it was about the break. And if you study Nietzsche and Jung at all, they talk about this. They both predicted the world wars because of what they could observe from the human psyche, and how at a certain point, I there was like something that we've had to go through, and there has been hijackings that have maybe made it worse, and the dark side has certainly had their own agenda. But I almost feel like it's like this 100+ years of chaos and turmoil. I feel like as we come out the other end of it, there have not been people that have been on the planet who have the awareness that we are going to have for since Atlantis, right? I mean, literally, like, So I'm excited for it. I'm
Well,
excited.
yeah. No, I was about to say that. You just got me excited. I mean, that's really exciting, really cool, and almost like it's. I think what we're in right now is like I had a rhetoric teacher describe my generation or something as anxiety of manyness.
Yeah.
I think we're in that, and then the fact that I mean, the gold, you feeling like we're on the edge of a golden age is so beautiful and exciting to me, and makes sense. Like even though it's people go back and forth with you about how could consciousness be higher now if they were healthier then. It's like, well, if you have to make it through all these different levels of like chaos and you transcend them, you have inherently higher awareness. Like they didn't have to be as aware and transcend as much as we do in this landing place of golden age.
Nobody has ever gone through the psychological warfare that we're going through right now. Nobody has ever gone through it. I mean, people want to say like, there used to be like real men out there. It's like a real man was not capable of being able to, like, if you've been able to deal with the psyops and navigate the psyops at this time period, you are you are going to come out so strong on the other end, because this is a crucible. Like I think that right now it's like I've called it like spiritual special forces training. We're going through stuff that people went through over the course of a lifetime. Like, and we're getting lessons bombarded like rapidly, rapid fire. I even think part of this is related to the fact that people have been dating more other people. Like, you used to only have one person for your entire life, but and I'm not against that. I think it's a beautiful thing. But as a counterpoint for some people who have explored, there's almost been like this accelerated kind of understanding of who you are, what you're looking for. In the past, you'd marry someone, then you'd spend a life navigating the lesson from that person.
Mm.
And now we're kind of like going through like an accelerated track. Like, okay, here's this lesson. You only get 2 years to like learn it. So learn it now. And now we're gonna move on to the next one. Like it's really, really rapid fire, and it's unmooring for people. Like you just feel like you don't know where you stand, you don't know where you're going. It's very, very difficult. Like in prior time periods, everything was laid out for you.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't, unless you were an adventurer or an explorer, you didn't have you had so much more certainty in your life. And I think that right now we are those same explorers, except on the frontier of the human psyche, the human experience.
Oh,
It's
I so agree. Because the word that stood out there is navigate, right? Like people are actually navigating it. I think it's not everybody's navigating it. Some people are just following the lead of whatever group are they
yeah, and
like.
there's
Some people have actually been navigating this shit, like like updating their decision making criteria and like their inner workings and like all the internal algorithms of like moving through life, and like that is no fucking joke. Like it's not for the faint of heart. It's
yeah,
spiritual. Oh,
ascension is not for the faint of heart. I mean, there are traps everywhere. People fall in them, and they fall in them. They don't know how to get out of them. They give up, and it really is a matter of like it's an internal thing. It's are you giving up? Are you like people who are like, I just want to go back. I just want to go back. They never survive. And like if you read anything in history, the people who are like, I just want to go back, like I just want it to be over, they die.
I hate that. That's just such escapist, just like hindsight bias, escapism type shit. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, of course, look to the past and look to the future and feel good about it and learn from it. But like, you're here. What a waste if you're trying to get out of that. And like,
Yeah.
can you deal with the frustration that arises of like the unprecedented levels of uncertainty in the world? Like,
Yeah.
as humans, we're like wired to like, we need some sort of certainty. And like, I mean, I think that's what you're talking about with people being on the front lines of this spiritual thing, is like you've strengthened your home frequency. You have an anchor within yourself. And that's like the only certainty that you can really count on right now.
Yeah. And that's why, as this, I mean, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Although, or maybe it's better to say it's going to get better and worse at the same time. Because I think those of us who are tapped in can feel it getting better, but it's also very scary because then you're observing reality collapse around you. And so you almost have to go inward for the sanctuary, because the external world is no longer providing anything. But as it's gotten worse on the outside, we've gotten stronger on the inside to be able to handle it. And as we get to the end of it, which I believe is the end of the decade, thereabouts, those of us who went through it, I mean, I'm just not, I want to be moving on to different stuff for that way. I expect that we'll have gone through it and we'll be like, I really think that it's going to be like, it's going to be the beginning of a golden age. I really see it, with people are going to be in a much better place. They're going to have the self-awareness, like people, there's going to be great relationships coming together. There's not going to be this collapse that you see right now. That's just what I see, what I feel.
Wow, interesting. Right? Like
we got 7 years to go though.
Yeah.
we gotta
I'm moving on in 2 minutes. I think it's 7 years later. The whole landscape's gonna flip then, if that in that scenario, right? Like,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, but I mean, it's gonna flip because we'll have flipped, right? Like I think even if let's look back even 3 years ago, when, I mean, we're at the cusp of when all this stuff began. Right now, like I left New York March 7th, 2020. Like it's almost the 3-year anniversary of it. I mean, you know, I still had a place there that I'd stop by at until 2021, but not much at all. Like that was like the end of my prior time there, as it was for so many people in their own locations. Like the difference between me then and now.
Oh my gosh. Me too. I feel like it's been a million years since then. So many different lives. Oh my gosh, so crazy. And I remember I found a tweet from March 2020, and I don't even remember what I thought I was talking about. And I was drinking, and like I don't even remember feeling tapped in at that point. But I tweeted something like, "I feel the matrix collapsing. This world is never going to be the same."
It's never going to be the same. And I believe that we're about to go through that again, in a different form, obviously, but we're on the cusp of a shift that we haven't felt since that initial shift in 2020. It's like a 3-year cycle. And as we move closer to that, like 2030 ish time period, I mean, I don't want to be too fixed on anything because it's all, but I do think it's going to intensify, because this has been like every year. I mean, I can go back, I could go back to like 2011, 2012 initial kind of awakening, and then up 2015 and 2016, that was big. And then it just seems like it's been going exponentially up, as you sort of approach breakout. And so I actually expect that it's going to get more and more intense, and we're going to look back and we're going to be like, oh yeah, you know, COVID was nothing, you know, in a certain sense. Like we would be able to handle that, like no problem. Because you look back on it, it was kind of silly. The whole thing was like, yeah.
So many things I've walked away from and disagreed with. I didn't even have a rationale at the time. Now, it's like, obviously, I have like I feel like I have a bulletproof case for not participating in the pandemic. 100%. But it's funny because at the time it was just intuition, or I thought it was rebellion. I'm just like, I don't give a fuck about this. But really, in hindsight, it was like, this doesn't feel right. This feels completely fake, and I have no justification for it. But bye.
Yeah. 100%. Well, Trina, we're gonna have to talk to a close. I got a dinner with a client. Gonna meet up with.
You don't have to justify it. This was so fun, and thank you for inviting me on.
It was a great conversation, really great conversation. I think for everybody here, you know, they're used to these things, and they're used to like that person has a sort of motif, and we just kind of hammer and we explore it. And I think what was really nice about this was that it was just like a conversation, very loose, very formless. And I think that people really got a feel for us in a different way than maybe they normally would. So, so thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Seriously. Thank you.
where can people can find you on Twitter?
So I just started my YouTube channel. I haven't posted anything on it yet, but I've been putting it off for too long. Trina,
You're gonna have to do one over the weekend because I'm gonna post this on Monday. So there has to be one video on there, Trina. One video. Just one. It can be anything. It can be talking
is this the catalyst for me? All right, Pat. I will honor you and get that done then.
All right.
And yeah, and I just started my Substack Trina Nuance, Twitter Trina Nuance.
Okay.
I haven't been on Instagram lately.
I'm gonna have all those links and I'm gonna put it below. And do you work with men and women with coaching? Okay, so I'll put that there too. If anyone wants to sign up, I gotta say this: you want to get somebody like Trina when they first start off, because it's usually a very good deal because they're figuring things out, but they already know a ton. They know a lot more than they realize. Like when I go back and I look at some like my early client stuff, it was, I don't even know. As people get to be more established, the gates close up more. So it's always really like a big thing to get on the ground floor, and the clients that you have with someone when they first get on the ground floor, it's, it creates a lifelong connection.
I don't think it's honestly like I've been doing this for people for way longer than before it was formalized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm exposed to a lot of savvy business people. And so I don't know how long the floor is going to last. I don't know if it even still exists, but that is very accurate. And I appreciate that.
Time to get in now. Take action now. Price is going up right after this video.
Thank you.
Anyway, it was a pleasure, Trina, and I will see you on Twitter.
Sounds good. Thank you, Pat.